Welcome to Glove Talk, your weekly news in boxing. If you're new to the channel and enjoy boxing content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button. And with that said, let's break down these fights this week and then let's get into the different weight classes and the news that's going on. So first, we're going to start with Matchroom, and that is Terry Harper and Natasha Jonas. This was a great fight. I think that, I was really happy to see so much buzz about female boxing on Twitter and on social media. There's a few things I wanted to note. I think some people got really annoyed that it was a draw. Some people thought it was very just. I had it Jonas probably just maybe squeaking it out, but honestly, I think a draw wasn't too bad. If anything, it gives, Eddie a chance to do, a second fight, really. So there is that. One thing that was interesting was Jonas's cornerman, Joe Gallagher, did kind of go on to social media and talk about this a little bit, and he felt as though she easily won. It's really tough when some of these trainers have multiple fighters, because immediately people kind of clap back, and we're talking about, well, now you know how Ryder's team felt when he fought Smith, and it was pretty much the only thing people were saying. Now you know how John Ryder felt. It was somewhat comical, but it did kind of show that that's where he obviously felt like Jonas won, his fighter won. I think that when you look at the very end, it's very telling. There's always this thing with ties or draws, I should say, in boxing. The person that raises their hands and looks and feels like they won compared to the other person that looks downtrodden or looks like they feel like they lost, that sometimes can just tell you a little bit about the mindset and what the fighters are thinking. The same thing is true when you look at Michael Hunter versus Povetkin. It was a draw, but at the end of it, Michael Hunter definitely felt like he won that fight, and Povetkin looked like he thought he certainly lost. So it's always, if you read the body language, it's always something to kind of note. So now moving to the PBC card, we had Jamal James and Thomas Delorme, and this was a great fight. I love fights like this where, they say styles make fights, and that's exactly what this was. You had, James with a much taller, longer reach. I believe he's around 6'2", and then you had Thomas Delorme, who was trying to get on the inside and was more effective when he could get inside and kind of do body work like that. It reminded me a little bit of about a year ago, so maybe a little bit more. But if you remember back to kind of Badu Jack versus Pascal, it kind of reminds me a little bit of that, where Badu Jack was kind of trying to keep Pascal at reach and try to use his kind of jab to kind of control the distance of everything, whereas Pascal was just trying to get in there and really be effective to body work, and just tried to actually bulldoze him quite a bit in the first couple of rounds, but then had to slow down. That turned in a draw. This one didn't. I think it was a good call. I had James and Delorme kind of very close rounds. I had him kind of going back and forth at the beginning, but then at the end, James seemed to come on strong and really kind of kicked it up a notch. I don't know if Delorme just kind of lost some steam, but he seemed to be able to not be as effective as he was in the beginning rounds. I think someone mentioned online that I thought was very interesting is that, Jamal James is what Robert Easter should be. I thought that was a great kind of take on it, because he really does utilize his size well and is very effective in terms of how he goes about using his jab, but then also his movement. He's very elusive for his size, doesn't really like to stick in the pocket. It was a great fight. I really enjoyed it. The crowd noise for this one bugged me a little bit, but I actually, the commentary was pretty good. BK, I'm never a big fan of him, to be honest with you, but I do love hearing Lennox Lewis talk. Something about Lennox Lewis, maybe it's just me, but Lennox Lewis is so calm, and he's kind of giving his insight, and it's just very direct, kind of simple and to the point. I really enjoy listening to Lennox Lewis kind of break down fights and give his 2 cents on everything like that. Anyways, moving from the fights, now we're going to be moving into the various weight classes and breaking down the news, going from lightest to heaviest. And first, we're going to start with Carl Frampton. Carl Frampton, is having to look now for a new opponent for his August 15th fight. Apparently there's been some visa issues, so he is on the hunt for someone new, and he may have to push this obviously date back if things can't be settled or if they can't find someone for him. I always like watching Carl Frampton because he's a guy that goes a million miles an hour, throws a ton of punches, and is just usually in fairly action-packed fights. So I'm curious who they partner up with him. Now going from Carl Frampton, now going up to lightweight, we're going to be talking about Tank Davis and Leo Santa Cruz. Leo Santa Cruz actually kind of brought up the fact about Tank Davis making weight and saying that if he doesn't, he's going to pay a big fine. I think that this is a good motivator for Tank. I think Tank has had issues with weigh-ins. I've brought it up before with the Gamboa fight. He moves up a weight class, granted it's only 5 pounds, but he then is over by 3-4 pounds, I believe it was. It's just, he has issues with weight. Not getting ready for a fight is sometimes an issue with him, but it was good to see that he is in the gym right now with Floyd Mayweather. So they're working together. That gives me a lot more confidence that he's getting that kind of support. I want Tank to be successful, and I don't want things like weigh-ins to be an issue for him. Why? Because the thing I like about Tank Davis is that he knocks people out. That's the thing with Tank Davis. You're gonna see probably a knockout when he's in the ring. He's just got a lot of power for his size. So if he's weight drained because he can't make weight, it's really gonna affect that. And I like to see him, in the best version of himself that we can get in the ring. So with that said, let's go to the biggest news in the lightweight division, and that's Teofimo Lopez and Vasily Lomachenko. Now, some new news came out from Lopez's side, and it's his manager saying that they didn't get any numbers for this fight until late July. I believe July 28th is the date that they utilized. And it's interesting because now they're saying that now that they're not happy and they're not signing the contract, Bob Arum isn't talking to them, and that he's talking more to the media, and that they want to have more negotiation and conversation. So I get that. I don't know how true that is, but one thing that was very weird that he did mention was that he said, hey, maybe ESPN can throw more money at this fight, and that way we'll have more money to have as a fighter and to sweeten the pot a little bit. As you guys remember last week, I broke down the fact that ESPN is tanking right now in ratings, and that they do not have money. They are doing layoffs and they are losing sponsors. So I don't think that's going to happen. I certainly don't think they're going to do that for this fight. So I think that's completely out of line for what's happening. But some new news came in that was very interesting to me, and I really want to break this down. And that is Lomachenko is now taking even less. He took a second pay cut. So he was already getting his minimum for this fight, which was 3.2, I believe. That's his guaranteed. He's now going below his guaranteed for this fight so that it can happen. I want to talk about this and really tell you a couple points that I think are interesting about it. Number one, how many fighters do you know take less than guaranteed money for a fight? No one does that. No fighter says, I'll take less so you can give more to the other guy so the fight can happen. That never happens in boxing. So this actually spurred a lot of conversation from people that aren't even Lomachenko fans, people that maybe even didn't care for him all that much. I saw people saying, this just shows me that Lomachenko cares more about legacy than he does money. Now, granted, with legacy comes a financial reward of it, but it does show how bad he wants this fight. And for a lot of people, it was very positive feedback for doing this and trying to just get this deal done. I think this is a huge signal to even Lopez's camp, which is, I want to talk about the second biggest point, is that this is almost a little bit of a mind game when you think about it. Now, Lomachenko isn't a big trash talker. He's a little bit more playful, kind of like when him and Luke Campbell were kind of squaring off in the UK, and they're doing photos and Loma reaches over and grabs the WBC belt, kind of joking, but kind of like this is going to be mine. Like, he does little stuff like that. But this to me is almost a little bit of, a mind game to Lopez's camp. I know I can beat you, and I'm not scared of you. I'll take a less than guaranteed. I mean, that's huge, right? I mean, that tells you how confident Lomachenko is going into this fight. I knew he was confident. I always feel like Lomachenko feels ready for a fight and very prepared. But I mean, this is just, it's a statement. It's basically a bring it on. Let's do this. You want more money? Here's more money. Let's do this. So I have to say, I was very surprised by this. I was very impressed, actually, that Loma was willing to do this. Now, there is people that are in a fan of Lopez that are saying this is all BS, that this is Bob Arum trying to sell the fight to make Loma look good and Lopez look bad, and that in actuality, Loma was always willing to take less money, and that this is just him trying to kind of play this game to get Lopez to sign the contract. I don't know if I would say that. That just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. So that's my take on everything. Like I said, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. You guys were very, very vocal last time. It's great when you guys kind of let me know what you guys think. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Anyways, let's move on to actually Jorge Linares and the Fortuna fight. That is not going to happen now. It looks like, sadly, Jorge Linares has contracted COVID-19, so he will not be fighting. Fortuna has talked about some other people he wants to fight possibly, but a name that came up was Devin Haney. I thought this was a really interesting name for this fight. Now, I think that Fortuna's date and Linares's date would probably have to be scrapped. I believe Devin Haney said online that he had a date, or there was a date that he was eyeing up already. So that's a very interesting fight. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but I would love to see Devin Haney and Fortuna square off. Sorry that, Linares can't be involved and that he got actually sick and everything like that, but we wish him the best. I'm sure he'll recover really quickly. Now moving up to 140, it looks like Jose Ramirez is going to be fighting Victor Postal. This is a very good fight. I like this fight a lot for a couple reasons. One, it gives us a point where we can look at how Jose Ramirez does against Victor Postal in comparison to Josh Taylor. So Victor Postal has lost to Terrence Crawford. No shame in that. He went the distance with Terrence Crawford, and he went the distance with Josh Taylor. So if Jose Ramirez goes in there and just obliterates him, it should give us a little bit more of a sense of how Jose Ramirez and Josh Taylor are going to do if they get the unification fight on. I'm a fan of Jose Ramirez. I really like him. I think this is a good fight for him. I'm certainly leaning towards him winning, but I don't see it being, a total cakewalk. That's for sure. I think Victor Postal is a solid contender in this fight. He is getting up there in age. He's 36 years old. So, say what you will, but if you're not going to have a major unification fight, at least you're fighting a decent opponent, right? Now moving up to middleweight, and Billy Joe Saunders said that if he doesn't beat Canelo, they don't have to pay him. I wasn't super impressed with Billy Joe Saunders in his last fight. I sometimes have an issue with him in terms of not staying in the best of shape when he's not in camp for a fight. But you got to give the kid credit for this. I mean, he knows how to stay relevant. If you haven't noticed, I've talked about Billy Joe Saunders. He's been in the news. He knows how to stay in the news, and he knows how to at least get his name talked about by people. I think him and Tyson Fury kind of work on this together maybe, but it's just always interesting to me how he finds a way to stay relevant even when he hasn't signed a contract. So I just wanted to touch on that. I think it's more comical than anything. So now moving up to light heavyweight. We haven't talked about light heavyweight in a little while. Oh, so it looks like Bivol will be fighting in late 2020. Glad to hear that. I was more interested in him going down to super middle and fighting Canelo. I don't think that's going to happen now, but that would be a very interesting fight for me. I don't know who he's going to be fighting. There's no date set. It's just something to quickly note for light heavy. And then another thing to mention is Arthur Beterbiev. Looks like he has an opponent for September 25th, and it is going to be Fun Long Mang. I maybe butchered that name. If I did, I'm sorry, but it looks like that's who his opponent is. I don't see this being a long fight. I mean, Beterbiev is just a wrecking ball. I'm pretty sure he has almost a perfect KO win percentage. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure if he doesn't, it's very close. He's incredibly gifted. What I really like about him is he's able to knock guys out with punches that don't look like they should be able to knock other guys out. It's just, he has so much power. He's also a very gifted boxer. Big fan of him, and I'm very excited to see what he has going on. Now, moving on from that to heavyweight, the WBC president has confirmed and is saying that he is absolutely going to make sure that Dillian Whyte gets a title shot based off of who wins with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Now, this sparked a little bit more interesting conversation because, obviously they want this fight to get done. A lot of people, especially, Eddie Hearn wants this fight to get done immediately because then they can kind of set up the Whyte fight and then right after that, the AJ fight. Well, Bob Arum comes out and says this fight might not happen until February 2021. And with that, with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder maybe having to kind of shelve this fight for a little bit longer, I could literally probably hear Eddie Hearn just getting so annoyed with Bob and wanting to pull his hair out. It's just, he desperately wants the AJ Fury fight. And this kind of move makes sense though from a financial standpoint because they know that hopefully by then we can actually have some kind of gate and it will make a little bit more sense money wise, because I have to imagine both these guys are going to be making buku bucks regardless if people really want to see this fight or not. I think it's good to have. I felt like, Deontay Wilder got destroyed in the second fight, but something to me seemed off, like maybe he got hit in the temple and the equilibrium was off. He just didn't seem like himself. I'm not blaming the suit. I will never blame the suit, but I would like to see what he can do one more time with Tyson Fury. The thing is, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I don't want to see this fight. I think it's a done deal. Don't ever underestimate that right hand by Deontay Wilder. He only needs one. That's all he needs. I'm not even the biggest Deontay Wilder fan, but I am respectful of that right hand of his. Now moving on to, retired heavyweights, and that is Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. have moved their fight to now November instead of September 12th. I believe it's going to be on the 28th. And, when asked about why they're doing this, it seems as though they're doing this for, promotional reasons. I think what happened was they initially had the date of September 12th, thought this was a good idea, and, they thought they might get a few people to tune in for it. Then they got flooded with just an unbelievable amount of press. It was just everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. They got so much hype for this fight that I think they just said, you know what, let's do a proper press tour. Let's do a proper, virtual press tour probably, but let's really promote this fight properly. I guess they're doing a 10-part documentary series on this fight, even so that way there'll be even more build up for this. I think it's kind of smart. I really do. The other thing is I wanted to point out some pros and cons of having this date in November. The pros are, right now it looks like college football, which would be on a Saturday on the 28th, is looking like it might not happen. It's looking like their schedule, if it does happen, might be shortened or very abbreviated. That's a good thing for this fight because the less people are watching other sports at that time, the more likely they are to tune in. The downside is if this whole promotion for this fight gets completely, well, just swept under the rug because of, well, it's an election year and elections are going to be starting in November. I believe the date's the 4th of November. But if things take a while because you're doing mail-in ballots and everything like that, that means that this fight could really, like I said, be swept under the rug because people are just going to be so frantically involved with the politics that are going on at the time, especially if there's recounts and it's just taking a long time. You know, it could be a real problem for a promotional aspect. I'm more leaning towards the fact that it will do better because it's moving rather than the latter of it doing worse. But I did want to bring that up. Another little side note to this, and I'll probably end here, is Roy Jones Jr. brought up the fact that the California State Athletic Commission, you know, they can't control Mike and that he'll be ready to have a war. You know, to me, this is Roy trying to sell the fight, but it's also very telling about the fight. You know, I think some people think these guys are going to get in the ring and they're going to totally square up and go at each other. This tells me that there's been rules set in place by the California State Athletic Commission. Stuff like maybe like no hitting to the head, or, you know, the level of aggression. Things like this don't speak well for the quality of the fight. And I'm thinking more and more now this is going to be glorified sparring session, to be honest with you, especially with no headgear and everything like that. If I wasn't concerned before, I'm certainly leaning much more that way now, just because of this statement. Now, I do appreciate the fact that, you know, Roy Jones Jr. is trying to hype this up as much as possible, but I'm thinking now that, you know, this is him trying to reassure people if they hear things that, yeah, you know, Mike's crazy, you know, classic kind of tactic to get people to think that, well, Mike won't follow the rules. Maybe he won't. Maybe they will square up and they will go crazy, but I'm not putting my money on that. So with that said, I want to thank you for stopping by. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to hit the like button. If you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.